Yesterday I turned 70. I still remember how proud I was when I first bought my car. It was many years ago, when I was much younger and full of energy. I used to drive everywhere. I liked the feeling of freedom. I could go to the market, to the park, or to visit friends whenever I wanted. I never liked asking for help. I liked to do things on my own. For me, my car was a part of my life. It was more than just a car. It was my way to stay free. I have lived in the same small town for more than 40 years. People here know me well. They often wave when they see my blue car pass by. I have always been careful on the road. I never drove fast. I always stopped at red lights. I always looked both ways before I moved. I was proud that I never had an accident. Not once. My friends used to say I was the safest driver they knew. I smiled every time I heard that. I believed it too. I was careful, and I was sure I would always be fine. This morning, I decided to drive to the bakery. I wanted to buy some bread and tea. The air was cool, and the sun was bright. I wore my favorite blue coat. I took my car keys from the table near the door, just like I always did. The sound of the keys made me feel calm. It was part of my daily habit. I stepped outside, locked the door, and got into my car. It started on the first try. The sound of the engine was soft and familiar. It made me happy. As I drove down the street, I saw a line of cars ahead. At first, I thought there had been an accident, but when I got closer, I saw that the police had made a roadblock. They were checking every car. It seemed strange, but I stayed calm. I had nothing to hide. I waited for my turn. When I reached the front, a young officer asked me to stop and open the window. He smiled politely and asked for my driver's license. I looked in my small purse and pulled out the old paper card I had carried for years. It was a little worn, but it was mine. I handed it to him with confidence. He looked at the card for a long moment. Then he looked back at me. His face changed. It was still calm, but serious now. "Ma'am," he said, "can you please step out of the car?" I felt confused. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked. He said, "Please just step out for a moment." I opened the door and stood beside my car. The air felt a little colder now. Another officer walked over and looked at the same card. They spoke quietly to each other. I could not hear what they were saying. I waited, holding my coat close. Finally, the first officer turned to me. His voice was kind, but firm. "Ma'am," he said, "it seems there is a problem with your license." I frowned. "What problem?" I asked. He sighed softly. "It looks like this document was never recorded in our system. It does not show up anywhere. Are you sure this is your official driver's license?" I stared at him, surprised. "Of course it is," I said. "I've had it for more than 40 years. I've been driving since I was young. There has never been a problem before." He gave me a gentle look. "I understand," he said. "But according to our records, there is no license under your name." I felt my face grow warm. I could not believe it. "That can't be right," I said quickly. "I have been driving for years. I've never had an accident." "I follow all the rules." The officer nodded. "I believe you," he said. "But the law says we cannot let you drive without a valid license." I stood very still. I could hear cars passing on the other side of the road. I could hear a bird singing somewhere far away. I did not know what to say. The officer asked if someone could come to pick me up. I said no. I lived alone. He offered to call a taxi for me. I thanked him, but my hands were shaking. It felt strange to stand beside my car and not be allowed to drive it. He spoke gently again. "Ma'am, I'm really sorry, but we must take the car until this is checked." I watched as another officer drove it slowly to the side of the road. My car looked small and lonely. I felt a sharp pain in my heart, not from anger, but from sadness. It was like losing a piece of myself. They gave me a paper and told me to go to the traffic office the next day. I walked to the taxi they called for me. The driver was an older man, maybe around my age. He looked at me through the mirror and said kindly, "Rough morning?" I smiled weakly. "You could say that," I replied. He nodded but did not ask more questions. The ride was quiet. I looked out the window and saw the familiar streets passing by. The bakery, the post office, the park. Places I had visited for years. But today they looked different, almost distant. When I got home, I sat in my chair and stared at the keys in my hand. They looked useless now. I tried to think. How could I have no license? I remembered the day I got it. I could see the small building, the line of people, the man at the counter giving me the paper. I remembered everything clearly, or at least I thought I did. I went to my small box of papers and looked through old documents, bills, photos, letters, but nothing about my license. I found the card again and looked closely. The letters were faded, the corners soft. For the first time, I wondered if it was real. Later that evening, my neighbor Jane came by to bring me soup. She is a kind woman who lives 2 houses away. She saw my car missing and asked if everything was all right. I told her what happened. She looked worried. "Oh dear," she said softly. "Maybe they made a mistake. Or maybe you had a license a long time ago, and it was never renewed." I shook my head. "No, I remember," I said. "I remember getting it. I remember everything." But as I said the words, I felt less sure. She put her hand on my shoulder. "You've been through a lot," she said gently. "Maybe tomorrow we can go together to the office. I'll drive you." That night, I could not sleep well. I kept thinking about my car and the police officer's serious face. I felt small, like a child who had done something wrong. I did not like that feeling. I had always taken care of myself. I had lived alone since my husband passed away many years ago. I paid my bills, cooked my meals, and went where I needed to go. I did not need help from anyone. But now, for the first time, I felt afraid. What if they said I could never drive again? What would I do then? I could not imagine staying home all the time. My car was my way to feel alive. When morning came, I made tea and sat by the window. The sun was bright again, but I did not feel happy. I waited for Jane to come. She arrived at 9 with her small gray car. I thanked her and got in. The ride to the traffic office was short. Inside, there were people waiting in line. We waited too. When my turn came, I gave the clerk my paper and the old card. She typed on her computer for a long time. Then she looked up. "I'm sorry," she said, "but there is no record of you ever having a driver's license." I felt my heart drop. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I've been driving for more than 40 years. She looked at me kindly. Maybe it was under another name, or maybe it was never made official. I stood there, confused and tired. "But I remember," I said softly. "I remember everything." Jane touched my arm. "Let's go home," she said quietly. I did not answer. I followed her to the car, but inside I felt lost. The road outside looked the same, but I no longer felt part of it. Before I continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now let's continue. The next few days were hard. I tried to stay calm, but I could not stop thinking about what happened. I sat at home most of the time. My car was not there, and the house felt quiet and empty. I looked out the window and watched other cars passing on the road. I saw people going to work or shopping. I wanted to be like them again. I wanted to drive. I wanted my life to feel normal. Jane came to visit almost every day. She brought food and asked how I was feeling. I said I was fine, but she could see I was not. She said she would help me talk to the traffic office again. She thought maybe they could find some old record or file. We went again that Friday. I took all my old papers, even school documents and old bills. I wanted to show that I had lived here for many years. I wanted them to see that I was honest. At the office, another clerk checked everything. She looked young and friendly. She said she would try to search again. She typed on her computer for a while. Then she looked up at me and smiled softly. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said. "There is still no record." I felt tired. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, I checked different years and names. There is nothing." I looked at Jane. She smiled a little and said, "Maybe we can find another way. Maybe you can take the test again." When I heard that, I was surprised. "The test?" I asked. "At my age?" The clerk said gently, "Yes. If you take a new test and pass, you can get a new license." I did not know what to say. I had not taken a driving test since I was young. My hands felt weak. I don't know, I whispered. Jane touched my arm. You can do it, she said kindly. You are a good driver. You just need to show them. I wanted to believe her, but something inside me felt heavy. I was not sure if I could. That night, I sat with a cup of tea and looked at my old photos. There was one photo of me standing beside my blue car. I looked happy and strong. I tried to remember that day, but my mind felt foggy. I could see the picture clearly, but not the memory. I closed my eyes and tried again. When did I buy that car? Was it after my husband passed away, or before? I could not remember. The thought made me nervous. I had always had a strong memory. I never forgot small things. But now, I was not sure about something as big as that. The next morning, I tried to find my car papers. I opened drawers and boxes, but I could not find them. I looked again and again. Then I realized something strange. I could not remember where I usually kept them. I sat down on the chair and took a deep breath. My heart was beating fast. I looked around my living room. Everything looked the same. The clock on the wall, the pictures, the curtains. But for the first time, I felt like I did not belong there. It felt like a house, but not like my home. Later, Jane called to ask how I was. I said I was fine, but my voice was quiet. She said, I can help you prepare for the test. We can practice together. I'll drive, and you can explain what you would do. I thanked her. I wanted to say yes, but I was scared. What if I could not remember the signs? What if I made a mistake? Still, I agreed. That afternoon, she picked me up. We drove around the quiet part of town. Jane pointed to signs and asked, What does this mean? I looked at one and said, Stop. She smiled. Good. Then she pointed at another one. It was a yellow triangle. I looked at it for a few seconds. The word on it looked strange. I knew I had seen it before, but I could not remember what it meant. Careful, I said slowly, unsure. Jane nodded gently. Yes, close enough. She tried to stay positive, but I could see the worry in her eyes. We drove for about an hour. I felt tired when we came back. My head hurt a little. When I got out of the car, I held the door for support. Jane said, You did great today. We'll do more next week. I smiled weakly. Thank you. When she left, I sat on the couch and stared at the floor. I tried to remember the second sign again, but the word was gone. I closed my eyes, but it did not come back. The next day, I went to the kitchen to make breakfast. I put the kettle on the stove and waited for it to boil. I sat down for a moment, but then I forgot why I had gone there. I looked around and saw the kettle still cold. I had not turned on the gas. I felt a small fear grow in me. I got up and turned it on, but I stayed close, afraid to forget again. I began to write small notes on paper. Turn off the gas. Take your medicine. Lock the door. I stuck them around the house. It helped a little, but sometimes I forgot to look at them. Jane noticed when she came again. She said softly, "Maybe you should visit a doctor, just to be sure." I wanted to say no, but I knew she was right. So the next week, we went to see one. The doctor was kind. He asked many questions about my memory. "Do you sometimes forget names or dates?" he asked. I said yes. "Do you ever lose things or forget where you put them?" I said yes again. He smiled gently. "It's normal to forget some things as we get older," he said. "But maybe we can do a small test to check your memory." He asked me to remember 3 words: apple, chair, and river. Then he asked me to count backward from 10. After that, he asked for the 3 words again. I remembered only 2. I tried hard to think, but the 3rd one would not come. When we left, Jane held my hand. "You did well," she said, but I could see the worry on her face. I asked softly, "Did I do something wrong?" She shook her head. "No, not wrong. Maybe just tired." But I knew she was not telling me everything. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face looked older than I remembered. My hands had small spots. My hair was thin and white. I thought about the police officer, the missing license, and the car I could not drive anymore. It felt like my life was slowly changing. I wanted to fight it, but I was so tired. A few days later, Jane came again. She sat beside me on the sofa. She said softly, "I spoke to the doctor. He said your memory may need some care. Maybe it's time to rest more and let others help." I looked at her for a long time. "I don't want to be a burden," I said. She smiled kindly. "You're not. You've helped others for so long. Let us help you now." I tried to smile back, but I felt tears in my eyes. I looked toward the window. The road was quiet. I imagined my blue car there, waiting for me like before. I wanted to believe I could still drive again, but deep down, I knew it was not true. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Maybe it's time." Jane held my hand. "Yes," she said softly. "Maybe it is." That evening, I sat near the window again. I watched the sunset, slow and warm. The sky turned orange, then pink. The light touched the old photos on the table. I looked at one of me behind the wheel. I smiled. It was a good memory, even if I could not remember every detail. I felt calm. Maybe I did not need to drive anymore. Maybe I just needed to remember who I was. Not with papers, not with cars, but with love and peace. A few weeks passed. I started to stay home more often. At first, I felt restless. I missed my car and the noise of the road. I missed seeing the world from behind the wheel. I used to go to the market, the park, the bakery. Now I waited for others to visit me. I tried to keep busy. I watered my small plants and made tea in the mornings. I watched birds on the fence. They came and went freely. I liked that. They could go wherever they wanted. I watched them and smiled, but sometimes I felt a little sad too. Jane came every few days. She brought food and flowers. She told me stories about the town. She said the bakery had a new sign and the library got new books. I liked listening to her. It made me feel part of the world again. Sometimes she asked if I wanted to take a short walk. I said yes, and we walked slowly along the street. She always held my arm, even when I said I was fine. The truth was, I liked when she did that. It made me feel safe. One morning, Jane came with her son Peter. He was tall and kind. He smiled and said, "Good morning, Mrs. Brown. How are you today?" I smiled back. "I'm fine. Thank you." He looked around the house and said, "You have a nice place." I thanked him again. He looked a lot like his mother, calm, gentle, always smiling. Jane said softly, "Peter will help me bring some things for you later this week." I asked what things, and she said, "Just a few things to make the house easier for you. A better chair, a small bell if you need me, maybe some soft lights." I did not want to feel old, but I knew she only wanted to help. Later that day, I tried to make soup, but I forgot to turn off the stove. Jane came in time and helped me. She did not get angry. She just smiled and said, "It's okay." I felt ashamed. I was careful all my life, but now I forgot simple things. I looked at her and said, "I don't like this. I used to do everything by myself." She said softly, "You still can, just not everything at once. It's all right to rest." I looked at her and said, "I feel like I'm losing myself." She took my hand and said, "You're not. You're still you. You're still the same person who drove everywhere and helped everyone." Her voice was warm, and for a moment I believed her. That evening I sat by the window again. The sky was gray, and a light rain began to fall. I watched people walking with umbrellas. I remembered how I used to drive in the rain. I always loved the sound of water on the car roof. I thought of the day the police stopped me. It felt so far away now. I no longer felt angry. I understood. The world was not against me. Time was just moving on. My car, my license, my memories, they were all parts of my story. I smiled a little. Even if I could not drive anymore, I had traveled far in my life. One afternoon, Jane took me to the doctor again. He said my memory was getting weaker, but I was doing well because I had good support. He said I should stay active and do small things every day. I thanked him and smiled. When we got home, I felt tired but calm. I sat in my chair and looked at the light coming through the window. Everything looked soft and peaceful. Over time, I forgot more things. Sometimes I forgot where I put my glasses. Sometimes I forgot what day it was. Once, I forgot Jane's name for a few seconds. When I remembered, I felt scared and said sorry. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, my dear. I'm here." I believed her. She never got angry. She spoke slowly and kindly. I started to write her name on a small card and kept it near my chair. Every time I looked at it, I smiled. One Sunday morning, I woke up and heard birds outside. I looked out the window and saw Jane and Peter washing my small car. I had forgotten it was still parked behind the house. They made it clean and shiny again. I opened the door and said, "It looks beautiful." Jane smiled. "We thought you'd like to see it clean." I walked slowly toward it. The car looked just like before, but I felt different now. I touched the door gently. "It's been a long time," I said. Peter asked, "Do you miss driving?" I looked at him and said softly, "Sometimes, but I think I've driven enough." Jane looked at me with kind eyes. "Would you like to sit in it one last time?" I smiled. "Yes, please." They opened the door for me, and I sat inside. The seat felt the same. I held the steering wheel and closed my eyes. I could almost hear the road again, the sound of the wind, the music on the radio, the rhythm of the tires, all the things I used to love. I felt calm and warm. "Thank you," I whispered. Jane said softly, "You're welcome." That night, I slept well for the first time in weeks. My dreams were soft and full of light. I saw myself driving down an open road with the sun shining on the hills. The air was clean, and I felt free. When I woke up, I remembered the dream clearly. It felt real, like a goodbye that was gentle, not sad. In the following days, Jane helped me move to a smaller place near her home. She said it would be easier for her to check on me. The new home was bright and simple. I had a small garden outside and a soft chair by the window. Jane visited every day, and sometimes Peter came too. I started to forget things more often, but I was no longer afraid. I knew I was safe. I did not need to drive anywhere anymore. The world could come to me. One afternoon, Jane brought me tea and said, "Do you remember the day we first went to the traffic office?" I smiled a little. "Yes, I think so." She said, "You were very strong that day. You didn't give up." I looked at her and said, "I thought I was losing everything, but maybe I was just learning to let go." She smiled and said, "Maybe that's true." As the months passed, I learned to live slower. I enjoyed small things, the smell of tea, the song of birds, the soft light in the morning. Sometimes I forgot the names of places or faces, but I never forgot kindness. Jane and Peter became like family to me. When I saw them, I always smiled. I may not remember every detail of my life, but I knew that I was loved, and that was enough. One evening, Jane said, "You know, I think your blue car is still waiting for you." I smiled. "Let it wait," I said softly. "I don't need to drive now. I'm already home." I looked out the window and watched the sky turn golden. The day was ending, but it was beautiful. I thought about my life, all the roads I had taken, all the turns, all the memories. Some were clear, some were not, but they were mine. I closed my eyes and smiled. I had lived well. I had loved. And even if I no longer remembered everything, I still knew who I was. A careful driver, a strong woman, and a soul at peace. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to